Thank you very much to the team from SA Arid Lands Landscape Board for the opportunity to talk at one of the summer series about the lessons of Australian livestock industry can take away from the current COVID pandemic. As mentioned, I'm Pene Keynes and I work for Livestock SA as the Biosecurity Extension Officer. So my role is funded through PIRSA Red Meat and Wool Growth Program, and it focuses on delivering outcomes that improve biosecurity across the SA livestock value chain. So I'm here today to talk about the livestock lessons from COVID-19. My colleague Emily Buttle, who you'll see up, her name up on screen, she's the Biosecurity Extension Manager for Animal Health Australia, and she's sorry that she couldn't be here with us this evening. So for those that don't know a little bit about Livestock SA, we represent about 3,500 sheep, cattle and goat producer members in South Australia. We're a non-for-profit organisation and we're working for our members and advocating on behalf of our membership and become the voice of those livestock producers on related issues around government issues and business and the wider community. So Animal Health Australia is my partner and I work very closely with Emily, as I mentioned. She works for Animal Health Australia, who is independently is the independent body for animal health in Australia, and they bring together government and industry to really deliver outcomes for animal health and biosecurity in Australia, but she's based here in South Australia. So it's pretty, everyone pretty much knows about COVID. We've seen a lot of headlines and those shockwaves that have been going around the globe, and we continue to see those headlines pop up that highlight the impacts that the virus has had on our day-to-day lives and also our industry. So I guess for me, agriculture really got off quite lightly compared to other industries, but as we were considered an essential industry, and really, I guess even for you guys in the pastoral area, daily operations have remained pretty much the same. But yeah, there's a lot of things in our industry that haven't that have had some repercussions of the pandemic. So things like I guess supplying of product to international markets has been limited. We've had some outbreaks in some of the meat processors facilities, reliance on one dominant trading partner for the sale of wool and other products that we've got in here that we export, and also the problems with not having international labour and the things that have come around that. So carrying out jobs and that need to be done, like shearing, we've been limited in our industry by not having access to some of that international labour. So COVID has been an example of human biosecurity, and it's what lessons that we can learn from this current pandemic with regards to the livestock biosecurity at a production level that we want to talk about today. So what things they have in common. So COVID-19 pandemic has really taught us to ensure we follow hygiene practices to minimise the spread of disease. This campaign that you can see up on the screen here is really one of Australia's government's ways of demonstrating the things that we were encouraged to do, that we needed to take responsibility of managing the spread for ourselves. So things like washing our hands, keeping that physical distance from each other, that 1.5 metres, isolating if we felt unwell, and also doing the COVID Safe app, or at the moment what we're doing is often in South Australia checking in at businesses. So these things have really helped us to keep the community transmission of the virus to a minimum here in Australia. But that importance of that monitoring and minimising the disease spread, it really doesn't stop at humans. The implementation of these practices slightly differing to the washing your hands and things like that, but the practices of good pest and disease monitoring and hygiene is really critical for the livestock industries to maintain that good biosecurity and animal health. So really, if we do have poor animal health and biosecurity, it really can have a significant influence on what we can achieve in Australia and the revenue for our industries, particularly the red meat and wool industry. So it's estimated at the moment that within the endemic diseases and the cost of those conditions to the Australian sheep industry, if we're looking at the sheep industry, that it costs about $2 billion a year at this point. So mainly through lost productivity. So there's some gains to be made by implementing some of this good biosecurity practices. So I just get into this before I do. Biosecurity is just the management of risk to the economy, the environment and the community of the spread of pests and diseases entering, emerging, establishing or spreading. Bit of a mouthful. Biosecurity can be implemented offshore, at the border or within the community. So in the case of animals and pest and diseases, animal pest and diseases, sorry, biosecurity can really and should be implemented throughout the whole supply chain. So from your gate to the processing and through to sale. So it should be everyone's responsibility to manage it. So that's been something that we've been asked to do through the COVID pandemic is really share that responsibility. And it's really all been related to biosecurity. So whether it be washing our hands or maintaining physical distance, effective biosecurity, whether it be human or animal disease spread, is the combination of so many different practices put together collectively that really do mitigate the risk of those diseases coming onto our property or into our lives. Yeah, so biosecurity is really, really important for our livestock industry. It's been reiterated a bit, but it's really important to maintain our business continuity, or at least as much as possible in a situation should a disease come in to our properties or to the country that's not around. So biosecurity is really important for the livestock industry as it really does underpin our productivity. Endemic diseases, like I said earlier, really do have significant impacts on the productivity through ill health, poor weight gain or wool growth that can be limited to from some of those endemic diseases. And really, Australia as an export market, I think two-thirds of our red meat goes offshore. So we really rely on market access, specifically internationally. So we do promote ourselves as clean and green, and having good biosecurity helps us to maintain that and be able to sell our products into those markets. So it also ensures that we have good animal health and product quality, which allows our customers and consumers to have confidence in our products and what we're producing. So that clean and green promotion that we have is all because we have good animal health, which then gives the consumers confidence, which then allows us to be able to achieve higher prices for our products. And also the way that by having good biosecurity protects our natural environment, and by reducing the pests and diseases in our environment, it also protects our natural environment and adds to the Australian credentials of being that world leader in stewardship around our environment. So when I'm talking about reducing the introduction of and spread of diseases, there are really two types of diseases that we're trying to actively avoid. The endemic and the emergency animal diseases. Endemic diseases are constantly present in the region and or the population. They're the things that just persist in our environment. Emergency animal diseases, on the other hand, or as we refer to it as EADs, include diseases that are really exotic to Australia. So new and emerging diseases that have that national significance have a really big impact on an industry. That can include also things like anthrax. So that is something that's endemic to some states in Australia, and that can actually be considered an EAD as well. So it doesn't have to be a foreign thing. So just to highlight the difference between endemic and emergency animal diseases, let's use this human example that I've got up on the screen. So the influenza, commonly known as flu, which I'm sure we all know, it's quite common in the community. We have preventative options for it, such as vaccines, and we also know that in most cases it can be treated with a bit of with lots of fluids and rests and all of those different things that we know what to do when we get the flu. We also know that it is prevalent, it persists in our community, and every year we are doing things to prevent catching it and spreading it. So that's an example of an endemic disease for humans. If we're looking at an emergency human disease, in the same way as an example of an EAD, COVID or corona is a relatively new disease. We don't know too much about it still. We're learning a lot more about it, but it's having significant impact on human health, our travel, our trade, and our national and global productivity. Our economies have been really challenged by it. So we would describe, COVID-19 as an emergency human disease if it were to be an animal disease. So just for two examples, for the livestock industry around endemic diseases, I'll use a sheep example. So foot rot, it persists in our industry. It's more prevalent in some areas and regions of Australia than others, but there are treatment options available, and the impact of it is known, and we know how to manage it. So there are producers that can work with management and actually eradicate it. So the example that I've got up here of an emergency animal disease that would impact the livestock industry, so foot and mouth disease. So currently Australia is FMD free. It is a highly contagious and a disease, and it would have really severe consequences if it were to be introduced into Australia. It is estimated that if an FMD outbreak that came into Australia, even if it was small, that lasted, say, for instance, 3 months, that could cost about $7 billion here to our economy. So it does have a significant impact on our industry if that were to enter. So if there was to be an EAD outbreak, Australia then would actually go into a lockdown. We'd experience a livestock standstill with some similarities to the COVID lockdowns, where the operations associated with that species, so for instance, EAD around FMD would be sheep and cattle and all of those animals, would completely stop. So that would really halt down everything. and those infected and at-risk animals would then likely be destroyed, and we'd lose our ability to market our products and sell our products into international markets pretty quickly, and that would have a severe impact on the price that we can ask for our products, if we just have to stay with the domestic markets. So why is biosecurity so important? Good biosecurity prevents both endemic and emergency animal pests and diseases from entering, emerging and establishing and spreading here in Australia. So a good example of where endemic and emergency diseases have been managed is highlighted in our efforts to keep COVID-19 under control. In following health advice, we've been able to minimise the impacts. We've also seen, as a spin-off from that, by doing those efforts, we've actually been able to see a significant reduction in flu cases in Australia, but also around the world. So that's pretty interesting to know that, the actions that we're doing on biosecurity for COVID is actually having impacts on other endemic diseases. So if we think of it in the similar way, in the case of animals, if we were to be implementing practices on property to reduce the risks of foot rot or lice coming onto the property, we are actually preparing and safeguarding ourselves from the impacts of an emergency animal disease incursion if one was to occur. So it's getting all those things in place so that if something does happen, and as we know, things do happen, who would have thought, 12 to 18 months ago that we would see COVID happen and this would be the case. So the unthinkable can happen. So this slide here just speaks to the fact that biosecurity is a shared responsibility, and we all have our part to play in reducing the risk of disease and pest spreading in Australia. Our government does play a really important role of maintaining our borders and ensuring that each jurisdiction and state government is prepared should an emergency animal disease incursion occur. Similarly, stakeholders who operate beyond the farm gate, your livestock agents, your sale yards, your abattoirs, those people also play a really important part. But I think one of the most critical places that we need to be focusing on is our own biosecurity, and that should be really paramount to your business, because that's the part that you can control. So there are a number of things that producers can do in order to limit the pests and diseases from entering and causing animal health and welfare issues on property. So it is really important that producers are proactive in their biosecurity to be able to be prepared for, firstly, endemics, which are having an impact on businesses, and also if the unthinkable happens and an emergency animal disease incursion does happen. So I'm just going to make a few little modifications to the Australian government campaign design, and I'll change it too. In order to maintain our biosecurity status and be able to keep our product clean and green, the Australian livestock sector should stay disease-free and do the three. So there are three things that any producer can do to minimise their biosecurity risks and maintain and enhance the sheep health and productivity. Preventing diseases, incursions and spread, preparing for an incursion does occur, and responding in that timely and effective manner to be able to limit the spread. So prevention is always the key. It's much better than a cure, as we all know. It's also often a lot cheaper. much like Australia's current COVID laws, we've seen border closures and those types of things. So that really is how we should be considering our own fencing around our boundaries. So thinking about those boundary fences as much as possible as the border to our property, and trying to keep those fences as maintained as possible, and checking those fences regularly as we can. So working towards keeping those pests and diseases outside of your borders, and thinking about the stray animals and things like that. When traveling at the moment, we're asked to provide a lot of documentation, and that's, you know, talking about where you've traveled, whether you've experienced any of the COVID symptoms, whether you've been in contact with anyone diagnosed with COVID while traveling. And these questions are always asked just to ensure that, to the best of your knowledge, you're not bringing COVID-19 back into South Australia. So that's, you know, really important for our state. So producers can use that same concept and think of their cattle and sheep health statements, health declarations, to as that documentation that you need when you're asking for a purchase. Here in South Australia, the sheep health declaration is mandatory, so every purchase needs to come with a sheep health statement, but our advice is to also extend that and ask for the cattle advice, the cattle health statement as well, because they're really a really important document to be able to provide you as the purchaser with the consignment disease history, and any other treatments or vaccinations that the animal may have had, you know, which is handy to have when integrating with those new animals into your animal health routine, and knowing what they've had, they've been experienced, and the animal health protocols at the farm from the producer that you're buying them from, the vendor. So COVID has also introduced human quarantine periods for travellers when arriving in Australia or crossing interstate borders, and I think that that's a really good take-home message for producers, is that if you are purchasing new stock or you're bringing stock back from agistment, any of those sorts of things, you need to be thinking about quarantine as a common practice for your stock. Keeping those new animals away from existing livestock for as much time as you need to be able to monitor and check any of the diseases or symptoms of those diseases that might have occurred in that area of where they've come from. It allows you also to really be able to treat and test and do all of those things that you can before introducing them to your current flock or your herd, because those animals really need to be looked at, and you don't know what you're buying in, and that's something that you need to be really aware of, because it's important. Oh, and the other one that you must think about is also quarantining or doing the right thing with stray animals as well, because they can also be a problem. So prepare is number 2. So we really need you to be monitoring your stock for unusual signs and symptoms, and that's something that the state and federal governments have really worked tirelessly in Australia to do to further prevent the spread of COVID. So really responding to possible disease incursions quickly in your flock or your herd, and monitoring those animals to detect any potential disease or early outbreaks for quick diagnosis and treatment, and being able to test for those conditions that may be prevalent in your region, but you don't have obvious symptoms for. So you might not notice that your stock is sick, but they might be, and you don't know it. So having as much information as possible is really important. So our governments have been using that COVID case number and data to really make those decisions about when we can lift restrictions and things like that. And there's a lot of information out there that producers can use to be able to understand what health problems are going on in their region. So for those who aren't aware, there's that enhanced abattoir surveillance program. So that's here in South Australia is for animals consigned to Thomas Foods International at Loberthal, and that program is monitored and managed by PIRSA. And so that information collects animal health data at the abattoir to monitor and minimise the range of significant animal diseases and conditions that can reduce the productivity of our industry. So there is that information. So if you've consigned stock, that information comes to your One Biosecurity, or if you're signed up for that, or on the livestock data link through Integrity Systems Company, or alternatively, if you don't have animals consigned, there's actually benchmarking data for your region that is that can show you some conditions that may be prevalent in your area that you weren't aware of. So it helps you to be able to really be able to test and treat for those conditions. Those reports are on the PIRSA website. So if you look up PIRSA website and Enhanced Abattoir Surveillance Program, that's where you'll find that. And you'll also find them on the Animal Health Australia website as well. The other thing that we really recommend, and well, it's almost imperative, that if you do see signs or unusual symptoms that are serious or you've never seen before, you should really contact your local vet, your animal health officer, or you could also call the emergency animal disease line. That number is up on the screen, 1800 675 888. And it's really important that anyone involved in the livestock supply chain has that number dialed into their phone, so that if anything does come up, they know the number, they can call it, and they can get the support that they need in identifying and treating that disease straight away. So if you have the chance, just pause it here and save that number. So respond. So most Australians recognise the seriousness of COVID-19 pandemic and have really rallied together to respond and contain the spread. So similarly, we would be in that situation if there was a notifiable disease or emergency animal disease outbreak, and everyone in the livestock industry is really going to be responsible for ensuring that disease is contained and managed as quickly as possible, and really, if we could achieve eradication quickly, that would be the ideal situation. So having all these things in place means that we can do that. So despite all of our work around COVID, you know, the borders are still there is some transmission still coming through, and I think that's something that we really need to think about for our biosecurity officers at international borders, is that there are still exotic pests and diseases that people are trying to bring into Australia. And sure, there's less travel, so people aren't bringing as much through, but there is always that risk. These things can happen accidentally without even knowing. So despite that work, we really need to be vigilant about that outbreak occurring, if that outbreak occurs, sorry. So in the event of that outbreak, the livestock standstill may be necessary, and everyone in the supply chain will really need to adhere to the guidelines and the responsibility for those disease responses. So the message is the same for endemic diseases. Like, we won't have a livestock standstill as such for those endemic disease outbreaks, but everyone in the industry will be responsible to understand, what they need to do, where their risks lie, and implement biosecurity to minimise that spread of those issues. So really, I just want to reiterate, biosecurity is important, just as important for endemic diseases as it is for EAD management. So just to recap on what we've just gone through, there's 3 things that the producer can do to minimise the spread of disease, and that is to prevent, prepare and respond. So I have definitely not gone through a whole comprehensive list of what every livestock producer should be doing on their properties, and they will vary between, but they're a really good starting point to get you thinking about what things you need to be implementing on your property, and really think about why the COVID response has been a really good parallel to what we're doing here in the livestock industry, and why the livestock industry should really take notice. All of these activities that we're talking about can really help our industry to get back on its feet in the case of an emergency animal disease, and keep our industry going with the endemic diseases. So just another point is that, everyone had to create a COVID safe plan if when if a business had closed, everyone was working from home, and the COVID safe plans really helped us to get back on our feet, and allowed us businesses to be back into business, because there were plans in place for each workplace. We weren't going to spread it to customers or our staff, and we had more ability through that plan to be able to know what we needed to do, and the community allow for community tracing and all of those things. So it is expected that of businesses now, that if they have a COVID safe plan in place, which then allows us to protect the community from the spread of COVID. And that's then giving Australia the ability to get back to business. So I just want to, in the same way, the biosecurity plan that we create for our businesses are essential to reduce the spread of minimise the risk of disease incursions for the industry, and that also will allow us to get back to business as quickly as possible. So I know that a lot of agricultural businesses, family businesses, operating properties may not require that COVID safe plan, but the development and implementation of an on-farm biosecurity plan is really the equivalent of that for agricultural businesses, to minimise that risk of spreading, things entering, spreading and establishing. So making sure biosecurity plans highlight what practices you're currently doing to minimise disease risks, to support your business, but also there's also some really good benefits at the moment now for that, to support credentials for some of your quality assurance programs in the industry, and also overall outlines what you do on your property to stop those disease and pests occurring. So I'm not going to go into each of these individually, but effective biosecurity plan covers off these 6 essentials, and they've been identified as inputs: people and vehicle and equipment, production practices, pests, weeds, outputs, train, plan and record. And these are all individual to your property. Not all practices will suit all businesses, but it's the process itself of going through all of these things and identifying the things that you need to be doing under these areas that will help you really customize that to your business and help you to prioritize what your business needs. So these 6 essentials are actually on the National Farm Biosecurity Reference Manual, the grazing livestock production one, and that really you can find greater detail of that on the Farm Biosecurity website. So there are a couple of steps just quickly to go through when you're developing your biosecurity plan. So firstly, and the first step we suggest you do is that on-property risk assessment. So really going through all of the strengths and weaknesses of your biosecurity on your farm, what the risks are of things coming in, etc., for those diseases and pests. And those templates that you use for that can be found as well on the Farm Biosecurity website. So producers should then document what they're already doing on property in that biosecurity plan. So that's where you put what you're actually doing. And then the third step is to create an action plan that runs alongside it. That helps you, that those assessment, the on-property risk assessment and the biosecurity plan work together to be able to highlight the action plan that really you can go through and prioritize improvements to your biosecurity that can happen over time, from high risk to dealing with those high risk things to some of the lower risk things over time. So what are your priorities? And the other one is that we really recommend that you review your biosecurity plan on an annual basis, and that allows you to really look at it over time. And because everything changes, everything can change in a year. So I did just mention the Farm Biosecurity website. It's a really good resource, and I've touched on it a few times today, but the website is developed and maintained by Animal Health Australia, who I'm in partner with, and Plant Health Australia, and it's really supposed to be a all-encompassing place for animal health and plant health biosecurity. So if you want to go to that website, it's www.farmbiosecurity.com.au. So there's a lot of information in there that might be of value to you if you're interested in looking at biosecurity. I will just quickly touch on PIRS's One Biosecurity platform. So that's the web-based tool that it is a biosecurity plan, and it demonstrates the practices that producers are doing on their farm already. It's held online. It's really valuable for both yourself, but also the industry, and for some marketing activities that you might want to do. It also creates that biosecurity plan, and it will meet the livestock production assurance requirements for your biosecurity. So that's really valuable, and it can do your animal health declarations as well without having to fill in the details all the time. So for more information on that, you can go to that website on the screen. Otherwise, go to the PIRS website and just type in One Biosecurity, or our contact details will be available, and you can contact us and have a chat about it. So really what we're trying to do is what we've tried to do in COVID is be able to plan for business continuity if something is to happen. It should be a part of that risk assessment, and if an adverse event does occur, and whether that be a drought, a flood, a fire, or an emergency animal disease incursion, then we're ready to be proactive and we're prepared to take action around biosecurity to reduce the risks. So really, at the end of the day, everyone has their hand in biosecurity. It's a shared responsibility, and that's been reiterated in the COVID-19 outbreak, is that we all have to do it together, and we've got our social responsibility to do that. So the 3 messages again are prevent, prepare and respond. to stay disease-free, to stay disease-free, do the 3. And the other one is definitely have that biosecurity plan to be prepared. So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the time today. I am a member of the South Australian Livestock Biosecurity Extension team. So here in South Australia, I'm here with Emily Buddle to provide you with resources and support for better biosecurity practices on property, but we also work across the whole of the supply chain. So feel free to contact myself or Emily on those details. We're also on the Livestock SA website if you need any information. Just reach out. Just quickly at the end, I just need to acknowledge our funding partners. So I'm funded through PIRSA and Livestock SA, and that is through the Red Meat and Wool Growth Program from PIRSA. And Emily is through the Sheep Producers Australia, Wool Producers Australia, Animal Health Australia, and the National Sheep Industry Biosecurity Strategy. So thank you again to SA Arid Lands Landscape Board. I am more than happy to help out where I can.